Hi all. Yeah, as Sue said, yeah, this is just a very, very top overview of what's changed in Sage between sort of 2016 and the current version, which is 2022. Now, one of the big changes is the way that we access the system. So obviously there is the classic desktop, I'm sure the majority of you all know, but there is also the ability to access Sage via web screens as well. So via a website coming in from a URL, so you don't actually need a client on your PCs. But we'll come to that one in a moment, and we'll start off with the Sage Classic desktops. So the first thing that's obviously changed, and every couple of years they try and do it, is they do a bit of a refresh on the icons. So they're sort of giving it a bit of a fresher feel, trying to update it, make it a little bit fresher that way. So in terms of, where things are and where they, how they work, in theory, they're all in the same places. It's just, they've jazzed up the icons a little bit on that front. Now, the main changes that we get with these upgrades as they're coming through the years are things that you can't see on the top level. So it's more to do with the infrastructure and the server operating systems and things like that. So obviously we're now running, I think it's SQL 19 on majority of servers. Obviously, Sage 2016 didn't even know that existed, so obviously they're upgrading it to work on those and things like as well, Excel, the latest versions of Excel, and also Crystal, things like Windows 11. So the majority of these upgrades that you get in the patches are more to keep it up to date with the current software and hardware that's available. So in theory, from a user point of view, you don't notice any of those, but obviously from a performance point of view, they're making the thing faster, getting it to work better on the latest technology. In terms of items that you do actually see, the first few changes are coming under the administrative services. So with regards to how the users are handled, the first one that's come in is under the administrative reports. There is a user authorization reports. Now, over the years, a lot of people have been saying that when the auditors go in, first thing they want to know is say, well, can you give me a report showing, what users can do what? And this user the authorization report is designed to do exactly that we can go in, look at particular users, say whether we want to see the security authorizations, what UI customizations they've got, but it gives a very quick and concise list of saying, here's our users and here's what they can and can't do in the system. When it comes up, so there we go, we have our user Debbie, and these are saying what her accesses are on the screen. So again, it's just something quick and simple to give to the auditors. The next thing we can see on these versions is actually knowing who's logged into the system. So obviously, whereas on the older versions, basically you would just say that all your users are in use, and you would be able to really see, well, who's doing them, what are they doing, how long have they been logged in. Whereas now they've updated the current users functionality on the system. And if I click in here, I can first of all see who's in the system. But if I had a window open as well, let me just grab something open. I'll just open a vendor window. There we go. So when we now go to our current users, not only can I see who's logged in, but if I tick on the box, I can actually see what windows this user's got open as well. So I've got AP vendors window open, and I opened that at 10:35. So I can see, well, is it something he's currently working on, or is it a case of he started doing it 3 days and just left his PC on and has gone? So we can see what people are doing there. The other thing we can do from this window as well now is we can actually log users out. So if it's a case of the admin has been in for too long, what I can do is I can click on the sign out there, and it will actually kick that user off the system. So no longer do you need to go to your IT department and say, look, can you kick users out? Anybody that's got the admin role within Sage can actually kick the users out directly themselves. The other change on the user front is being able to reserve licenses. So we've got this new option down here of reserve a LAN pack license. And so what this does is if you've got 10 users and there is a particular user or product that you always want to have access to the system, you can reserve that license for them. So if anybody, things like IMAN, if you're using IMAN to import transactions into your system, IMAN uses a license for a few brief nanoseconds while it logs in, creates the transactions and logs out. Obviously, if all of your licenses are in use, IMAN gets refused and says, sorry, you can't log in, so things don't work. So you can reserve users for that. Also, things like financial controller, they might say, well, actually, I want to be able to get access whenever I want it. Again, you can reserve the license for them in the system now, and that will mean that whenever they want to get in, that user will always be able to get into your system. There's obviously a few other little minor changes with regard into Office 365 integration and things like that. So obviously we can put in email details down here, so it enables you to link with Microsoft Office a lot more easily. So that's the main changes on the admin. The next thing we've got is on the general ledger, and this is probably going to apply to most screens in the system. So whereas previously in the GL, when we were creating transactions, if I was creating a new batch here, we'd have to save the batch and come out and do it. But whereas now you'll find the majority of the screens have all got a post button within the journal. So what I can actually do is, rather than create an entry, go back to the batch screen and post it, I can create my entry in here. Stick anything random on in here. Now, and actually, once I've actually added it, I can now come back into here and actually just post it direct from in this screen. So you no longer need to go out from there. The other changes we've got in the general ledger is we've now got this introduction of a document date. Whereas previously we could only put a posting date in a year and period, we can now have an additional date of a document date that you can use to also then run on reports. So on things like the transaction listings and things like that, you can report on document date as well as posting date on there. Also, another thing that's been requested over the many years is knowing who entered the transaction. So again, now in the top left-hand corner of most of the screens within Sage, it will actually tell you who entered the transaction. So that be that a GL journal, an AP invoice, anything like that will now tell you who's entered it. The other thing we can do from the main screen as well is obviously we've got the ability to post all batches. So if I've got 2 or 3 batches that are sitting ready to open, what I can do is just mark them as ready to post from here, and then I can just click on the post all batches, and then it's just going to get rid of everything in one go. So no longer are we jumping between different screens to go and say, right, I'll mark these as ready post and now go to a different screen and post. We're able to do it all from the one screen. So that's general ledger. Again, next ones we've got for AP and AR. Again, these are around being able to post transactions. So if we're looking in the AP transactions, in say our invoice or our payment batch, again, once we create our new batch from here, again, we've got the ability down here. See, we've got the post button to enter an invoice and post it direct from the main screen. Likewise, we've got this post all button as well. So if I had a lot of unposted transactions in here, again, I could mark them as okay to post, and then I can do the post all from in there. The same would apply from AR. It's exactly the same. It's mirroring what's going on in AP. The next one we've got is bank services. So again, there's a few things that's coming up in bank services now. So the first one is, again, when we're on the bank reconciliation screen, let's get into that. Bank transactions. There we go. So again, when we're on our reconciliation screen, we've got the ability here that we can save and post the reconciliation. So whereas on the older versions, you'd have to save it from here and then come out and then do the post reconciliation. Again, they're just trying to bring everything into the one screen. One thing that you probably won't see unless you're doing lots and lots of transactions, on the reconciliation. Let's just stick a date in to keep it happy. 21. Yeah, is on the quick clearing. Again, in older versions, this used to be a real slow and clunky process. So again, I think what they've done is they've rewritten the logic underneath it. So it actually does do it a lot quicker underneath it. So if we just want to do a process, boom, it's just done, I don't know, 70,000 transactions there in seconds. Whereas that used to be a bit of a grind. You'd hit the button, go away, have a cup of tea, and then you'd might actually have it done. So they've obviously done a bit of work under the covers on that one. The other thing that is in the process of coming in as we speak is being able to reconcile e-statements. So what this is doing is these are then starting to link into your bank accounts. So you don't have anything live on this at the moment, but what we can do is we can link our bank to a live bank feed. So as long as your bank is offering the particular feeds. Has it gone? So obviously we can go and find a popular feed, whichever one we want. So if it's HSBC. At that point, I then start to sign into my bank account, and then we can then be bringing the transactions straight out of our bank account and bring them straight into Sage. And one thing to mention on here is obviously Sage will then try its best to reconcile what it can on your current bank rec with what's in your bank account. Obviously, the thing to really bear in mind on that is the caveats is that these reconciliations are only as good as the information that's on your bank account. So we normally find with any bank rec, whether it's a free one or you pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for it, things like AP, where you can control the information that goes on the bank statement, whether you're putting a reference number, an invoice number, a supplier number, those transactions are a lot easier to reconcile. Whereas if you're bringing information in from your customers, you've got no control over them at all of what they will put on as the reference. If they put an invoice number on, great, system's got something it can latch onto and clear it off. But if they just put on the the reference from me, the system's going to struggle to work out who it is. You might be lucky and it'll have a unique value or unique date, but on the whole, it's only as good as the information that's on your bank statement. So just to set a sort of an expectation that everyone thinks, oh, that's going to solve all my problems. It's, it will make a good go of it and it will probably get you a bit closer, but you're never, ever going to get 100% on a bank reconciliation. So that's something that's in the flows at the moment. The next thing that the system has got is introduced visual process flows. So what we've got now under here is we've got these options of visual process flow, which again is just trying to make it easier for new users to work their way through a system. So if we were looking at the AP transaction workflow, what it does is it gives a visual representation of what you can do in there. So obviously we can enter invoices, we can make payments, we can do our transaction reports. Likewise, we can look on the vendor records. So the screens that it's looking at, if I wanted to look at a vendor record, I can click on there and it's going to go up and open the same vendor screen that we would see on the other parts. Likewise, if I was going to enter vendor invoices, it's just going through and it will open up the same screens that we've got. Again, these screens are customizable by yourself. So if you wanted to set them up for specific users to only put certain items that people see on, obviously you can create these to work how you want them to on there. The final few little bits that we've got on there, again, depends on what modules you're using, is things like the purchase orders and the sales orders. So on purchase orders now, when we're entering purchase orders, there we go. We've got the ability now to set arrival dates and set locations on the entire purchase order. So rather than doing it on a line-by-line basis, you can then just go and set it globally for the whole thing. It's got a similar thing on the sales orders. if I was looking at the order entry, then what we can do is we can set the ship date and the locations on all the orders. So again, it's just trying to make it easier to do it all in one hit rather than doing them individually on the lines. So again, we've got this set ship date and set the location down on the bottom as well. So just a little bit of extra functionality on there. The other main things that are coming out in this version, or in the last couple of versions, is under our tax services, we've now got the ability to do withholding taxes. So if you're dealing with particular countries or regimes that are doing withholding taxes, so in effect, when you pay your supplier, they'll send you an invoice for, I don't know, $100 plus the taxes. What you do is you just pay the $100 to your supplier, but then the tax amount you then have to pay to the local authority on their behalf. So the system now has the ability to do the withholding taxes in there. Obviously, we have reverse charges, which again is obviously what was been in there for a little while, but it's also handled in our 300 MTD program as well. So depending how you're dealing with it, you can either do the reverse charges there, or it's handled in the MTD product. The last things we've got really are the product is now compatible with the Sage data and analytics tool, which is a new cloud-based BI tool that they're in the process of bringing out at the moment. So in the current versions that we're seeing coming out now, they're going to start rolling out that you'll be able to put all your Sage data in the cloud, and then obviously you can then run the BI reports on it from there. Last thing to add is, after many years, the FR reporter, which up till now has always been 32-bit Excel is the only bit it works with, it now finally works with 64-bit Excel. So all the people that have been holding off putting Excel or 64-bit on their systems just for the FR, obviously we can now go to 64-bit. So that's the big change on that one, which has been many years in the pipeline. So they're the changes, really, well, the top line changes to the desktop solution we've got on there. The web screens that we mentioned here is, if I just go and open up a browser here, so we can see what's going on in there. Let's just go out. It seems to be the slowest server in the world, this one. Right, okay. So obviously we're going via the outside world to get into our system. Obviously, as before, we can do a username and password to log in, and like on the classic desktop, we can select which company we want to log on to. So if we just sign in on there. So first thing we've got is, on our desktop, we've got what Sage referred to as widgets. So these are almost little KPI driven things that we can go in and say, well, what do we want to see on these particular widgets? So if I wanted to look at account balances and things like that, I can come into here, I can edit the settings or the title and say, well, actually, what do I want to see? Do I want to see petty cash on there? Probably not. I can go and have a look at a particular account and say, well, let's have a look, what's in the suspense account? So I can save that on there. And again, what I can do is I can get a view of what's in these accounts. So the sort of information that you want to see on a snapshot basis. In terms of entering the transactions and things, the menu structure is very similar to what's in the back end. So if I go into the general ledger, I've got my accounts, I've got my transactions, periodic processing, setup and things. So everything I'm looking at in the main system. So if I wanted to look at, say, the accounts, I can come into here. These are my accounts that I'm looking at. Let's just pick one there. So again, in terms of viewing the detail, entering the detail, yeah, very similar layout and way to how it's working onto the back end. So it's just obviously being driven through the the web front end. The other things we've got, again, everything that you can do in the back end. We've got our transactions invoice list. So it's just a different way of accessing the screen. Obviously, there are a few caveats to the web-based screen, whereas within the back end Sage 300 screen. If I wanted to add something to a screen, I can just add new. I can go and add a shortcut on a program to here, or custom reports and things. Very easy to do in the back end, but obviously from the web-based screen, we can't add, just extra custom icons on there, on the drop of a hat, as you can in the back end. Likewise, third-party modules. A lot of the Sage third-party developers are now getting on board with the web screens, things like the EFT, Cashbook, I think Resource Manager, a few of the norming products, they're on there, but there are a few of the weird and wonderful products that just, aren't available there at the moment. And again, it depends, whether or not they may be coming on in a few years, or they might just stick with the classic desktop. So again, it depends which products you're using, I suppose, how often you use them, and whether or not, you can go solely to the web screens, or you might have to keep, some back-end desktops just to do certain tasks, on the information. But I say this is the, the web screens. I say it's just another way to get in and do everything that you want into the Sage desktop. Okay, yeah, so that's really it for the improvements on there, and I'll hand you back over to Sue.